They say the most dangerous moments don't come with warnings. No loud alarms. Just something simple, something that feels harmless. For me, it was a dinner invitation from my boss. That's how it started. It had been a long day at work. The office was quiet. Everyone had gone home. The lights were dim, and outside, the city buzzed like it always does. I was still at my desk, pretending to focus, pretending to care. And then he appeared, leaning casually on the edge of my desk, like it was just another moment between colleagues. He said he didn't want to eat alone. Asked if I wanted to join him. And I said yes. That one word changed everything. I didn't think twice. I didn't feel guilty. I felt seen. Noticed. Like someone actually wanted me around. Like I mattered. It's been almost a year since that night, and I still lie awake wondering what would have happened if I had just said no. But I didn't. I can still see it, the way he looked at me over dinner. The way he listened. The way the wine loosened my thoughts, made me laugh too easily. The way silence filled the space between us, heavier with each second. Then came the moment. The one I never expected. The one that shifted everything. An empty wine glass. A quiet street. A hotel door. His eyes on mine. And then, the words. What he said to me that night. I never saw it coming. And I've never been the same since. I'm 38. Been married for almost 12 years. I work as an executive assistant at a large firm downtown. The kind of place where everything moves fast and everyone pretends they've got it all together. I've been there almost 7 years, long enough to see people come and go, long enough to become invisible in plain sight. At home, things are quiet. Too quiet. James, my husband, is the kind of man people describe as solid. He pays the bills, mows the lawn, reads the news every morning without fail. He's not cruel, not unkind, just distant. It's like we started living parallel lives somewhere along the way, and neither of us noticed when we stopped crossing paths. We don't fight. We don't talk much either. Meals are eaten in silence or in front of the TV. Most nights, he falls asleep before I've even finished brushing my teeth. When I climb into bed beside him, he barely shifts. There was a time when he used to reach for me. Not anymore. I stopped asking why. I told myself this was just how long-term marriages go. That love turns into comfort. Comfort into habit. Habit into silence. I thought I could live with that. I thought I was fine. Until Carter. Mr. Carter. My boss. Mid-40s. Divorced. Sharp suits. Steady eyes. He walks into a room and everyone adjusts themselves without realizing they're doing it. There's something about him, something controlled but magnetic. People listen when he speaks, and he never raises his voice. He doesn't need to. He'd only been at the company a few months when I started working directly under him. He moved fast, reshaped teams, launched new projects, brought a kind of electricity the place hadn't seen in years. And yet, with everything going on, he noticed me. Not in the obvious way. Not at first. It was the small things. Like how he remembered how I took my coffee. How he asked about my weekend and actually paused to hear the answer. How he complimented my work, specifically. Thoughtfully. Not the usual throwaway praise you hear in meetings. And sometimes I caught him looking at me just a little too long. Not creepy. Not overt. Just long enough for me to notice. And then he'd look away like it never happened. I told myself it was nothing. That I was imagining it. That I was just tired. That I was flattered because I hadn't been looked at like that in a long time. My days blurred into one another. Emails. Conference calls. Scheduling meetings. Running reports. Smiling at people who didn't remember my name. Coffee runs that turned into lunch pickups. Always busy. Always invisible. But with him, I didn't feel like just another face in the hallway. He'd ask for my input in meetings. Lean in when I spoke. Look me directly in the eyes. And when he laughed at something I said, really laughed, it did something to me. Something I hadn't felt in years. I started dressing a little differently. Nothing drastic. Just sharper. Lip gloss instead of chapstick. Heels instead of flats. I told myself it was for me. That it felt good to feel polished. put together. But deep down, I knew who I was hoping would notice. And he did. It wasn't like we flirted, not in the traditional sense. We never crossed lines. Not out loud, anyway. But there was always this current beneath the surface. A tension I couldn't explain and didn't want to. Sometimes I'd feel his eyes on me during meetings. Just a flicker of a glance. But it lingered. And every time it happened, my heart would stutter, just for a second. I'd go home and sit across from James at the dinner table, watching him scroll through headlines, barely saying a word. I'd ask how his day was, and he'd mumble something without looking up. And I'd wonder if he even saw me anymore. And then I'd think about Carter, about the way his eyes followed me when I walked into a room. The way he smiled like he saw something in me I'd forgotten was there. I knew I was walking a fine line. But I also knew what it felt like to come back to life. It was a Thursday. Late. The office was nearly empty. Most of the team had already left hours ago. The sky outside was turning that deep kind of blue that only happens right before night settles in. I was still at my desk, finishing up a report Carter needed for an early morning meeting. I hadn't even noticed how long I'd been there until he stepped out of his office. He didn't say much at first. Just walked over and stood beside me, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the screen. "You always stay this late?" he asked, half smiling. I laughed, mostly to cover the fact that my heart picked up the moment he appeared. Only when someone forgets how many pages they're asking for. He chuckled. Guilty. Then he paused. Looked at me. Really looked. "You're sharp, you know that? You see angles other people miss." I didn't know what to say. Compliments like that weren't common in my world. Not ones that felt real. Genuine. "I was going to head out," he added, "but if you've got a few more minutes, I could use your thoughts on a pitch I'm revising. Private strategy session." He smirked like it was a joke, but his eyes were steady. I hesitated. Everything in me wanted to say yes. But something tugged inside me. So I said, "James will wonder where I am." Carter shrugged. "It's just dinner. Besides, you've earned it. My treat." That's how it started. 10 minutes later, we were stepping into a small Italian place 2 blocks from the office. Warm lighting. Soft music. The kind of place where you lower your voice without realizing it. We sat across from each other in a quiet booth near the back. The conversation started off professional, talking about the pitch, the client, projections. But somewhere along the way, it shifted. He started asking questions. Personal ones. But not invasive. Thoughtful. "Do you like what you do? What would you be doing if you didn't have to think about money? What makes you feel alive?" James never asked me things like that. And it wasn't just the questions, it was the way he listened. Like he cared. Like the things I said mattered. Somewhere between the wine and the candlelight, I let my guard down. We talked about childhood memories. Regrets. Dreams we hadn't told anyone else. He shared how his marriage fell apart, how the connection slowly faded without either of them meaning for it to. How silence crept in and made itself at home. I felt seen. Understood. Like someone had reached inside me and turned on a light I forgot I had. At one point, he reached for the wine bottle to pour another glass. As he did, his fingers brushed mine. Just a touch. Light. Quick. But I felt it everywhere. I told myself it meant nothing. That I was imagining things. It was just dinner. Just conversation. Just 2 coworkers having a meal. Right? But then, why did my pulse skip? Why did I lean in a little closer, even though I knew I shouldn't? Why did I feel wanted? When the check came, I reached for my purse out of habit, but he stopped me with a look. "Don't. This is my thank you." I nodded, suddenly very aware of how close we were sitting. Of the way the air between us had changed. It was heavier now. Thicker. Charged. We walked out into the cool night together, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. Then he turned to me and said softly, "You're different, you know. Most people, they're just moving through life. But you see it. You feel it." I didn't know how to respond. My throat tightened. My chest ached. It was the kind of compliment that didn't sound like flattery. It sounded like truth. On the drive home, I replayed every word. Every glance. Every pause. I told myself it was all professional. that I was imagining the rest. But then I asked myself, why did it feel like something had just shifted inside me? Why did it feel like the ground I'd been standing on wasn't quite steady anymore? I looked at my phone. No missed calls. No texts from James. Just silence. And somehow, that hurt more than anything else. It had been months, maybe longer, since James looked at me like I mattered. I don't mean in a dramatic way. I mean in those little ways. Those moments where someone's eyes linger just a second longer than they need to. Where you feel noticed. Wanted. Like you're still someone in their eyes. With James, those moments had stopped a long time ago. And I hadn't even realized how much I missed them until Carter reminded me what they felt like. I sat in the car that night, parked in the driveway for longer than I should have, staring at the porch light James had probably turned on out of routine. Not for me, not because he was waiting. Just habit. Like everything else between us. I felt this weight in my chest, a mix of guilt and something else I couldn't quite name. I kept telling myself, nothing happened. It was just dinner. And it was. Technically. But why did it feel like something had happened? Like something had opened inside me and couldn't be closed back up? I walked through the front door. James was on the couch, TV remote in hand, eyes glued to the screen. He glanced at me, barely, and mumbled, "Hey, you're late." I told him I stayed back at work, grabbed a bite on the way home. He nodded and turned back to the TV. That was it. No curiosity. No questions. No noticing the subtle shift in my voice. The change in my energy. Just silence. I went upstairs and stood in front of the bathroom mirror. My lipstick had faded. My eyes still held the trace of something warm, something I hadn't seen in a long time. I looked alive. And that's what scared me. Because I hadn't realized just how numb I'd become. How much of myself I'd buried just to keep going. There was a time when James used to touch the small of my back in the kitchen, just because. When he used to text me in the middle of the day with something silly or sweet. When he used to reach across the bed at night and pull me close. Now, the bed felt like a quiet divide between two strangers. We didn't fight. We didn't laugh. We just existed. Dinner was quiet. Always. Forks scraping against plates. Occasional updates about work, but no questions about how I felt. No curiosity about what I needed. And maybe that's why Carter's words hit so hard. You see it. You feel it. I couldn't get that line out of my head. It played on a loop, over and over. Was it just charm? Just a line he'd used a dozen times before? Or did he mean it? And why did I care so much? I kept replaying everything from that night. His voice. His eyes. The way he poured the wine. The touch of his hand. How natural it all felt. How dangerous. There were moments, quiet ones, where I'd close my eyes and feel that same rush I felt at dinner. A spark I hadn't felt in years. But right after that spark came the guilt. The shame. What kind of woman feels this way after a dinner with someone who isn't her husband? I hadn't cheated. I hadn't crossed any lines. But emotionally, I knew something had shifted. And that's the part that messed with me the most. Because I kept trying to justify it. Telling myself it was innocent. That I was just flattered. That I needed to feel like a woman again. That there was nothing wrong with craving connection. That I wasn't doing anything wrong. Not really. I told myself I deserved to be seen. Didn't I? I mean, how long is someone supposed to live in the shadows of their own marriage before they start needing something, anything, that makes them feel real again? But deep down, I knew the truth. It wasn't just about being noticed. It was about feeling wanted. And I hadn't felt that in so long, I'd forgotten what it even felt like. I hated how much I looked forward to work the next morning. How I caught myself choosing earrings that matched my blouse. How I checked my phone more than usual, just in case he messaged. How my heart raced when I heard his voice down the hallway. And then came the questions. The ones I asked myself when the house was quiet and I was alone with my thoughts. Was I unhappy? Was this marriage just routine now? Was I being selfish? Or was I finally waking up? I didn't have the answers. I still don't. All I knew was that something inside me had been stirred. Something I thought was long dead. And the more I tried to silence it, the louder it got. I started dreading the evenings with James, the silence, the small talk, the emptiness. I'd sit across from him at dinner and feel like I was cheating just by remembering Carter's voice. But I wasn't doing anything wrong, right? It was just a meal. Just a conversation. Just a man who made me feel like I mattered. I told myself that over and over again. But no matter how many times I said it, the ache in my chest wouldn't go away. The first text came the next morning. Just a simple, "Great work last night. Couldn't have done it without you." Harmless. Friendly. Professional, even. I read it 3 times before I replied. Appreciate that. Glad I could help. It should have ended there. But it didn't. Over the next few days, he started texting more often. A funny meme. A link to a podcast. A photo of a coffee cup with a caption, "Missing your brew this morning." And I responded. Every time. It felt innocent enough. Just small exchanges here and there. But there was something in the way his messages made me feel like I was in on a secret. Like we had this little thread tying us together outside the office walls. Then the messages changed. They became more personal. More vulnerable. He started telling me things. About his divorce. How it was slow and painful. How he didn't even realize how lonely he'd become until the silence in his house started echoing. He said he missed companionship. Real connection. Someone to talk to at the end of the day. I didn't know how to respond to that. But I told him I understood. Because I did. Too well. We started texting late into the night. Sometimes past midnight. I'd be lying in bed beside James, phone glowing under the covers, heartbeat louder than the words on the screen. I started dreaming about Carter. Not sexually at first. Just dreams where he was there. Laughing, talking, looking at me like I was something beautiful. One day, he called me into his office. Closed the door behind me. Said he wanted to talk about a client presentation. But before he did, he reached into a drawer and pulled out a small box. A deep navy blue, wrapped in a silk ribbon. He handed it to me without saying a word. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet. Minimalist. Elegant. Not too expensive, but thoughtful. Intentional. "For all your hard work," he said, softly. "You've gone above and beyond." I stared at it, then at him. I managed a quiet, "You didn't have to." He smiled. I wanted to. I didn't know what to make of it. It wasn't too much. But it wasn't nothing either. Was I reading too much into this, or not enough? I wore it the next day. I told myself it was just jewelry. Just a gift. But the way he looked at it on my wrist, like it meant something, sent a shiver through me I couldn't shake. Then came the retreat. A weekend work getaway at a lakeside resort. Team building, presentations, networking. But by Saturday evening, everyone had loosened their ties and found their way to the bar. I was nursing a glass of wine alone, scrolling through my phone, when I felt his presence beside me before I even saw him. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. I shook my head, smiling before I could stop myself. He ordered us both drinks, even though I hadn't asked. We started talking. About nothing, really. Work. People. Funny stories from the office. But somewhere in the middle of his second drink, the air between us shifted again. He leaned in closer. Close enough that I could smell his cologne, warm and familiar. Close enough that his voice dropped, quieter now. "You know," he said, his eyes locked on mine, "you deserve more than what you're settling for." I froze. Those words, they hit something deep inside me. Something I'd tried so hard to keep buried. I felt my breath hitch. My skin burn. I looked away, but he didn't. He just sat there, calm. Still. Like he already knew how I felt before I did. And then, he said something that stopped my heart. The bar started thinning out not long after he said it. "You deserve more than what you're settling for." I laughed. A nervous, quiet laugh. I told him not to say things like that. But he didn't take it back. He just looked at me, steady and calm. Like he meant it. And that was the most dangerous part. He did mean it. We left together not long after. Walked in silence through the hallways of the resort. Carpeted floors, soft lighting, the low hum of quiet all around us. It was late. Most of the others had gone to bed. Everything felt still. But inside me, my heart was thudding so loud I was sure he could hear it. We reached my door. I stopped, turned to face him. There was a long pause. He looked at me for a moment, then said, without blinking, without hesitating, "I have a proposition." I swallowed. I already knew what was coming. I felt it before he spoke. One night. No strings. Just honesty. And there it was. Laid out like a quiet offer. Not pressure. Not manipulation. Just a choice. My breath caught. I could feel my pulse in my ears. Everything around us seemed to fade, the walls, the hallway, the world. It was just me and him. And the space between us. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Time felt like it stopped moving. I looked at the door behind me, then back at him. My mind was spinning. Was this the moment I crossed the line? Or was this the moment I finally chose myself? I could hear James's voice in the back of my head. Not saying anything specific. Just the sound of him. Familiar. Distant. And I thought about all the nights I'd laid next to him feeling like a ghost in my own marriage. I thought about all the times I'd cried silently in the bathroom, wiping my face before going back to the table. About how many smiles I faked. How many times I told myself this was just what love turns into. And then I thought about Carter. About how he made me feel seen. Heard. Wanted. Even now, he wasn't begging. He wasn't pressing. Just waiting. Waiting to see what I'd do with the moment. I reached behind me. My fingers found the keycard. Slid it into the lock. The door clicked open. I stepped back. Pushed it open slowly. And then, I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. I just looked at him, and I let the silence speak for me. Then I closed the door. Slowly, but not all the way. And in that tiny sliver of space, everything changed. Fade to black. When I got home, everything looked the same. The dishes were stacked beside the sink. The living room light was still on. James had fallen asleep on the couch again, remote resting on his chest, mouth slightly open. It should have felt familiar. Safe, but it didn't. It felt like walking into someone else's life. I stood there in the doorway for a long time, just staring at him. The man I married. The man I thought I knew. The man who never asked where I was, or why I was quiet, or what I was feeling. He stirred slightly and mumbled something I couldn't make out, then rolled over. I walked upstairs, undressed in the dark, and slipped into the shower. The water hit my skin, and I thought maybe it would wash something off me, maybe the guilt, maybe the memory, maybe just the noise in my head. But it didn't. I stayed under the water too long. When I finally climbed into bed, James didn't move. He didn't even register that I was there. I lay on my side, eyes wide open, listening to his steady breathing. Everything felt heavier. The next morning, he handed me a mug of coffee like he always did. Said, "You working late again tonight?" I nodded, even though I had no idea. He didn't press. Didn't look at me too long. Just turned back to his paper and took another sip. That was all. But the space between us felt louder than it ever had before. When I got to the office, Carter was already there. In his usual place. Calm. Composed. Like nothing had changed. He didn't look at me right away. Didn't speak to me until our paths crossed by the printer. When he did, he just smiled. Not wide. Not obvious. Just enough. Enough for me to know he hadn't forgotten. That he remembered every second. And just like that, my entire body flushed with heat and panic and something I didn't want to name. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The silence was louder than anything he could have said. The rest of the day, I moved through the office like I was made of glass. Fragile. Breakable. On display. Every interaction felt like I was being watched. Every step felt deliberate. Every word, too careful. I couldn't focus. I couldn't breathe the same way. It was like my skin didn't fit right anymore. That night, while James was watching the news and I was folding laundry in the bedroom, my phone buzzed. A single message. "Thank you for trusting me, Carter." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding in my ears. I read it once. Then again. My thumb hovered over it for a long time. Then I deleted it. But my hands shook for minutes afterward. Because no matter how fast I erased it from my phone, it was already burned into me. I kept asking myself the same question over and over. Did I betray my husband, or was I already betrayed by his absence? I mean, what even counts as betrayal anymore? Is it a moment? A night? A choice? Or is it the years of silence that come before it? The slow erosion of intimacy, of being looked at but never seen? Because if we're being honest, I don't know when James stopped seeing me. I don't think he ever meant to hurt me. I don't think he even realized it was happening. We just drifted. Slowly, quietly. The way people do when life gets too loud and emotions get too quiet. And yet, I still feel guilty. Guilt that clings to me, even in the moments I feel justified. Guilt that won't let me sleep, even when I remind myself that technically, I didn't do anything. But if nothing happened, then why do I feel like everything changed? Why does the house feel colder? Why does his touch feel foreign? Why do I flinch when he reaches for me now? There are moments I catch myself watching other women at the grocery store, in the waiting room, walking their dogs alone, and I wonder how many of them are like me, living quiet half-lives, carrying unspoken loneliness, smiling through empty dinners, wondering if the ache in their chest is normal, or if it's the beginning of something they're too afraid to name. I never thought I'd be one of them. The kind of woman who gets emotionally tangled with someone she shouldn't. But then again, I never thought I'd be so alone either. I've been trying to figure out what to do next. Do I confess? Would it help? Or would it just hurt? Would he even care? Or would he just shrug, turn the page of his paper, and move on? I used to think love was about loyalty, about staying. Now I wonder if love is also about being known. Because what's the point of staying if you're invisible? And Carter, he saw me. That's the part one can't forget. The part one can't shake. He saw the version of me I thought had disappeared years ago. The part that still laughed. The part that wanted. The part that hoped. And for one night, that version came alive again. But at what cost? I walk around with this weight now. This blurred line I can't undo. Because I don't know where the line is anymore. Where exactly does betrayal begin? Is emotional cheating any less real if you don't act on it? Is a touch only wrong when it lingers? Is a conversation only innocent until you start needing it? I don't have the answers. All I know is this: something in me has shifted. And no matter how hard I try to go back to the way things were, I can't unknow what I felt. I can't unfeel what it meant. And that's the part no one talks about. Not the night itself, but the after. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like you were being pulled between loyalty and loneliness? Have you ever stayed in something out of duty, but felt yourself quietly disappearing inside it? Because that's where I was. And I still don't know if what I did was wrong, or if I was just human. I didn't plan for any of this. I wasn't looking to cross lines. I didn't go searching for validation or attention or the kind of connection that wakes something up in you after years of numbness. But when it came, I didn't turn away either. And that's the part one wrestle with. So now I'm asking you, what would you have done? Was it emotional betrayal? Or just a desperate grasp at feeling alive again? Let me know your thoughts, even if you don't agree with mine. I want to hear from people who've felt this kind of tension, who've lived inside that gray space where things aren't clear and hearts get confused. And if you've been here before, if you've stood at the edge of something dangerous, something tempting, something that made you question everything you thought you knew about love and loyalty, you're not alone. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this. Real ones. Raw ones. The ones no one talks about, but everyone feels. Because sometimes the most life-altering choices are the ones we never say out loud. Some proposals don't come with contracts or signatures, just consequences. No paperwork. No declarations. Just a moment. A look. A choice. And once it happens, you can never unchoose it. Not really. You can try to go back to the way things were, but something always lingers. The silence between you and the person you come home to. The ache in your chest when you're lying beside them. The secret you carry like a second skin. If I've learned anything, it's this: never underestimate the small emotional gaps in a relationship. They don't always show up as screaming matches or slammed doors. Sometimes they show up in the form of silence. Neglect, a lack of touch, a lack of care, a lack of being seen. And if those gaps go unspoken for too long, they can swallow you whole. I never gave Carter an answer out loud. I didn't have to. But maybe silence was its own kind of betrayal.